Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bible study for Flat Earth Friends. We're starting on Matthew this week, or this week. Good evening, everyone. And I am working, trying to get everything set up here. I had to do it a day earlier, so we probably won't have a lot of viewers, but at least you'll be able to watch it recorded. Anyway, I'll keep an eye on the chat room and see if we get anybody that has a question. Now, we are doing Matthew chapter 10, but I did promise Rich B.O.B. that I would address the issue of statues because, you know, in the Ten Commandments, it says, don't make any graven images. Now, that means don't make any images of false gods. However, this does not rule out statues, or, you know, every art museum in the world would be, you know, non-Christian, and, you know, you couldn't have a statue in your house or your garden, or, you know, and so actually in the Bible, it told people to make images. If we go to Exodus, and again, I'm using the King James 1611 version. So if we go to Exodus chapter 25, 22, 23, oops, too far. Okay, and verses 18 through 22, I believe. Okay, Exodus, oops, I'm in the wrong book here. Exodus, I went one book too many. So, Exodus chapter 25. Verses 18 through 22, I believe it is. Let's see. Oh. I'm just not turning to the right page tonight. Must be a little sleepy. Okay, here we go. So Exodus chapter 25, verses 18 through 22. This talks about the construction of the lid of the Ark of the Covenant. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold. These are angels with wings, you know, of beaten work shalt thou make them in the 2 ends of the mercy seat. That's the way that the 1611 version of the King James refers to the Ark of the Covenant. And make 1 cherubim on one end and the other cherub on the other end. Even of the mercy seat shall ye make the cherubims on the 2 ends thereof. And the cherubim shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings. And their faces shall look one to another towards the mercy seat, shall the faces of the cherubim be. So it says, and thou shalt put the mercy seat above the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I give thee. And I will meet with thee and commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I will give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel. So there's an example of where God commanded images to be made of 2 cherubim or angels that arch up over the Ark of the Covenant. So, so that's an example of a statue. And so, and there's more. So if we go to Numbers, that's this Leviticus, Numbers 21. I had really meant to do this last week, but I got distracted by a bunch of other questions. So anyway, I'll just address it now. And even though Mr. Rich B.O.B. isn't here, he can look at the recording and it will be in there. So chapter 21 of Numbers. Now, the children of Israel have been complaining to Moses, and why did you bring us up out of Egypt? And there's no bread. All we have is this manna. You know, they're just being a bunch of whiners, right? So in verse 6 of, okay, chapter 21, verse 6, and the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much of the people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. And here's an interesting thing before I get any further. God doesn't take away the fiery serpents. I mean, these fiery serpents are a kind of it could be a kind of viper. They call it a flying viper. It's like a very fast snake, and its bite is very painful. So anyway, and the Lord said, and then, so this is what the Lord said for Moses to do. And the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass, and put it upon a pole. And it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. So in other words, their lives were spared, but they still suffered with the bite of the serpents. So this is what happens when you get to complaining to God. So he does deliver you, but maybe not in the nicest way. So anyway, just a little side note there. But so there he commands him to make a serpent of brass. And there's a purpose in this serpent of brass that was put on the pole, because this was a prophecy. And Jesus speaks of this prophecy in John, let's see, John chapter 3. There's a lot of stuff in John chapter 3. The Gospel of John, chapter 3. I always forget that the New Testament is so much smaller than the Old Testament. That's why it's important to relate the New Testament to the Old Testament, because the Old Testament is the prophecy of Jesus and the Messiah, but the New Testament is revealed more fully by reading the Old Testament. So anyway, so in St. John chapter 3, verses 14, this is, so he's talking about, it says let me just read it in context. I'll start at 11. Verily I say unto you, we speak that we do know, and testify that we have seen, and ye receive not our witness. If I had told you earthly things, you believe not. How shall you believe if I tell you of heavenly things? And no man hath ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man. Again, there's that Son of Man title of Jesus again. Even the Son of Man, which is in heaven. So this is like, and the Son of Man was in heaven, because Daniel the prophet saw him as the Son of Man, Jesus as Son of Man in heaven, if you recall from last week. So, and then here we get to the punchline. Okay, so Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, verses 14. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. So here he's the serpent that was lifted up on a pole in the wilderness that delivered the people from death is a prefigurement of Christ in his crucifixion, where he's prophesying about his crucifixion here. So Even as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. So there's another case where there was a making of a statue or an image of a serpent, and it was used to prophesy of Jesus Christ. So again, we see that, there's nothing against making statues or images, engraved images. What it means is you do not make images of false gods, like, Baal or Dagon or any of those false gods. And so, and then another one where there were images is when Solomon was building the temple. We go to 1 Kings. Let's see, 1 Kings chapter 7. Okay, 1 Kings chapter 7, verses 23 through 44. So this is where the Lord is giving instructions on how to Solomon on how to build the temple. Oh, hello, Nathan. I didn't know who was actually listening, but I had to change the day because tomorrow is like evening services for Holy Thursday, so I couldn't do it tomorrow. So anyway, I don't know how many people are going to show up. So anyway, we're talking about statues. Hi, Snack to the Future. So we're talking about statues, and that just simply statues are not forbidden. It's when we make statues of false gods that it's forbidden by the 10 Commandments. So anyway, and we're talking about how statues were actually commanded by God. So anyway, if we go to 1 Kings chapter 7, verses 23 and thereafter, and he made a molten sea 10 cubits from one brim to the other. It was round all about, and his height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. Now, this sea is actually a big basin for doing purification rituals. Yeah, great. Rich B.O.B. talked about, Nathan, Rich B.O.B. talked about, how graven images are forbidden in the 10 Commandments, and so why do churches have statues? So I was going through and showing some examples of where God actually commanded statues to be made. So anyway, so there's this big basin. It's like for purification rituals, sort of like a big baptismal font, if you will. And so the molten sea, and it talks about how big it is, and under the brim of it, around about were knops compassing it, 10 in a cubit, compassing it round about, and the knops were cast in rows where it was cast. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, 3 looking toward the west, 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. So there's like 3 oxen in 4 different directions, with the basin or this baptismal font type purification basin set on top of them. So here, the Bible is actually calling for the making of, oxen, as, like, it's not the golden calf, but they're making oxen out of brass. And it goes on in 1 Kings chapter 7, make cherubims, make lions, all kinds of creatures, in grave, they're not graven images, but they're statues that went into the temple. So anyway, I just wanted to bring these up because you have to differentiate between like just images of any kind versus the graven images that they talk about in Deuteronomy and Exodus, that these are images of false gods. So that would be the difference. That's how you differentiate. So anyway, so I just wanted to address that because people were asking about it. So, and I promised I would get back to him on it. We didn't have time before. So anyway, that's all about the statues. So do we have any questions in chat about statues or anything like that? Okay, let's get started on Matthew chapter 10. Now, this begins with Christ sending out his 12 apostles. Now, let's see, there's something interesting. We talked a lot about baptism previously. So anyway, in chapter 10, Jesus has shown that he has power, but he's about to give it to his 12 disciples. So if we begin in chapter 10, verse 1, and when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out, to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. And then now he names the 12 apostles. So he's giving the 12 apostles his power. This is conferring the power to the apostles that he had and his authority to do these things. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these. The first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, patron of Scotland, James, the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, doubting Thomas, and Matthew, the publican. So they point out that he's the tax collector. In fact, it's funny because this is the Gospel of Matthew, but he kind of accuses himself, says, "Yep, I am the publican. I'm guilty. You know, I'm the big tax collector." James, the son of Alphaeus, and Lebbaeus, whose name was also Thaddeus. So I love how these guys all have so bunch, like Simon is called Peter, and James, whose surname was Thaddeus, and Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot. We know all he is. We're going to be talking about him. In fact, the Mass that's celebrated tonight, they actually call it Spy Wednesday because they read the part about where Judas betrays Jesus. So I'm not going to that Mass. It's too far away, and I had this to do. Okay, so anyway, there's the 12 apostles. These 12, Jesus sent for, commanded them, saying, "Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So at this point, there is no mission to the Gentiles. This is all still part of Israel, but you got to remember that there were Jews in Syria, there were Jews in, they had been taken. Oh yeah, that's true. Spy Wednesday, that's what they call it. Well, in it's the old school way of referring to it, Spy Wednesday. So, Nathan, yeah, I don't know if the Anglicans call it the same thing, but anyway, so it's like Spy Wednesday, Holy Thursday, which is the commemoration of the Last Supper, then of course Good Friday, and then Holy Saturday, which is the commemoration of the resurrection because it happened late at night on, or supposedly happened late at night. So anyway, so tonight is Spy Wednesday. Okay, so he's sending him out to the house of Israel. No mission to the Gentiles yet. Anyway, he says, "And as ye go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand." See, this is always like the theme, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of heaven. "Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils, freely have received, freely given. Okay, so basically he's saying, I've given this to you freely. This is the power and authority. So this is not something you're going to keep to yourself. You need to give it to as many people as possible. These blessings of healing and cleansing. So anyway, provide neither gold nor silver nor brass in your purses, nor scrip for your journey. That's like money. Neither two coats, neither shoes, nor yet shoes. Oh, what do they wear? Sandals, I guess. And nor yet staves. So not even a staff to walk with. For the workman is worthy of his meat. And into any city, into whatsoever city or town ye shall enter, inquire who in it is worthy, and there abide until ye go thence. And when ye come to a house, salute it, and if the house be worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it be not worthy, let your peace return to you. So this is he's basically sending them out. They're having to just totally walk in faith. They don't get to take anything with them, and just have to rely on whoever can provide for them on the road. And whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear your words, when ye depart out of that house or city, shake off the dust of your feet. Verily, I say to you, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. Sodom and Gomorrah. An interesting thing about Sodom and Gomorrah is, let's see, it was apparently the way Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed was that God rained down sulfur. And if I go back to Genesis, I believe that is okay, almost there. Oh, here we go. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So let's see. Okay, this is where, Noah bargains with him to say, if there's like 20 righteous, will you spare Sodom and Gomorrah? And he said, for 20 righteous. And so he finally gets it down to 10. He says, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. So apparently Lot had to find like 10 honest men in Sodom and Gomorrah, and he failed. The scarecrow has showed up. He said he would show up. Let's see. So anyway, let me skip to the next bit where he goes. So the angels come and tell him, we're going to destroy, Sodom and Gomorrah is going to be destroyed. You have to get out of the city. And there's a bunch of fighting about that too. And so he didn't want to leave. The angels put the compliance hold on him and made him leave. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay, so, and when the sun was risen upon the earth, when Lot entered into Zoar, so they went to this little town near Sodom and Gomorrah. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities that grew upon that which grew upon the ground. So in other words, he destroyed not only the people in the cities, he destroyed it so nothing ever grows there again. And I believe that Sodom and Gomorrah is on the south end of the Dead Sea. So, nothing grows there. So apparently still nothing grows there. And Interestingly enough, when they've done some excavation there, they've gone down far enough to where they would get to the point where there was Sodom and Gomorrah, and they find these big sulfur nodules that could only be created by a horrendous amount of melting, burning sulfur being thrown down from above, because it's like covered in a layer. So I always thought that was interesting what they found there, because nowhere else can you find these big sulfur nodules except for where they excavated out Sodom and Gomorrah. So that's how he destroyed them, raining down sulfur and fire, or as they call it, fire and brimstone. Excuse me, my throat's a little scratchy today. Okay, so anyway, he says, shake the dust of your feet, and it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. So basically saying he's sending out to the scattered tribes of Israel the best. And if they refuse that, the apostles, then, you know, if they're not willing to accept the apostles, then they're like toast. He says, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. So, but beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues. And ye shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. So this is prophesying, actually, the early Christians, this sort of thing did happen. But when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what ye shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour what ye shall speak. For it is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you. Now this is interesting, because in the book of Acts, you know, I don't know if you know much about the Apostle Peter, but he says all the wrong stuff at the wrong time all the time. But after the Feast of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came down on the apostles, he became quite a different person. Instead of like denying Christ, he professes Christ boldly. And let's see, there was a really good example of it, if I can find it. Let's see. So here. Okay. Oh, that's the stoning of Stephen. Let's see. That's not what I was looking for. You know, you preached a good sermon when they kill you afterwards. That's what Stephen's story is all about. Let's see, I think it was like right after the Feast of Pentecost. So that would be... So does anybody have any questions so far? I think it's in chapter 5. Oh, I wish I could find it really fast. Oh, here it is. So anyway, they've imprisoned Peter, and who else was imprisoned with him? Oh, maybe it was just Peter. Anyway, so they brought him, they set him before the council, and the high priest asked him, did we not straightly command you that you should not teach in his name? And behold, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. Then Peter and the other apostle, John, because John in his gospel always refers to himself as the other apostle. He never names himself in his gospel. So, and Peter and the other apostles said, we ought to obey God rather than men. So anyway, he's saying, I'm going to obey God. I'm not going to obey you people. So anyway, that's an example of, the kind of thing that they had to deal with after the resurrection. So anyway, and so Peter there, he knows exactly the right thing to say. Before he didn't. He was always saying the wrong thing. But that was after the Holy Spirit came on him. And anyway, it goes on in Matthew chapter 10, as a continuing here on verse 21. And the brother shall deliver up brother to death, and the father the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents, and cause them to be put to death. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved. Now, I just want to point this out because this is a theme that you see a lot in the Gospels of Jesus saying this. He that endureth to the end shall be saved. So he's describing here a lot of the stuff that happened to the early church, a lot of persecution. And, but he says, he that endureth to the end shall be saved. Because, and this is something where you can have a lot of difference of questions, because the question, are you saved? So this seems to imply that there's not a specific time that you are saved. Yes, when you call upon the name of the Lord and you accept Jesus Christ, you are saved in a sense. But it says here that you need to endure to the end to be saved. So it's sort of like you have been saved, you are being saved, and you will be saved. So, I know there are a lot of predestinarians out there, but this is one of those verses that tends against predestinate salvation. So anyway, controversial verse there. So anyway, and this theme recurs, I think there's about 7 or 8 times that Jesus says in various Gospels the same thing. He that endureth to the end shall be saved. Oh, do I believe in physical baptism or in spirit? I believe in physical baptism. And when I get to John, I can talk about that. There's like a whole lot of references to water baptism as necessary for salvation. So it doesn't mean like if you don't get baptized, you don't have the opportunity to get baptized. God's not going to condemn you for that. But if you neglect to do it, he will call you to account for it. So I could talk about that later, but Nathan says, just accepting Jesus into your heart isn't enough. Tell me, Nathan, where is it in the Bible that it says to accept Jesus into your heart? Because it's not written. No, I mean, those words, accept Jesus into your heart, is nowhere in the Bible. That is a predestinate Calvinist tradition that crept in. That's a tradition. It's a traditional understanding. It has nothing to do with Scripture. So I'm just saying. I mean, I'm going to say what's in the Bible, and and whether it's politically correct or not. But from my reading of the Bible, it tells me that water baptism is necessary. So doesn't mean that accepting Jesus into your heart isn't a good thing and helpful to your salvation, but it's well, for baptism, I will say one thing, which is in Peter, 1 Peter 2. 1 Peter. Oh, where is that? I don't have my notes on that, but I think I could find it. Maybe it's 2 Peter 2. One of those. This is talking about the justice of God. I could probably look it up. I'm just not, I don't have it in my notes right now. Let's see. It's Peter talking about Noah. Oh yeah. Okay, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 20. So if we look at first epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 20, which sometime were disobedient when once in the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah when the ark was a building. When the ark, let's see, waited, which sometime were disobedient, which once the long suffering, he's talking about, you know, God's justice in olden times. When once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah while the ark was a building, was a preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. The like figure whereunto, this is 21, the like figure, one whereunto even baptism doth also now save us. So people who don't believe in baptism have a real problem with that verse. That's just one. There's several others actually. Is Romans 9 to 10 misused for predestination? Oh, the problem with Romans is so many people will grab a verse out of Romans and read it completely out of context. And you know, we get to those things, you will you'll see that there's a lot more to Romans, because in Romans, you have to remember that Paul is addressing a very specific issue where the Jews who have become Christians say that the Gentiles who become Christians have to become Jews in order to be considered Christians. And Paul is saying, no, 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 no. And so a lot of the times when he's talking about works and the works of the law, he's talking about the 613 mitzvot of the old Mosaic law. So, you know, that works of the law has a very specific context in Romans when Paul talks about it. And so anyway, back to chapter 10. I didn't think that would open such a can of worms, but justification is a very important aspect, and actually justification is one of the biggest things that creates many divisions among different denominations. Is what does it mean to be saved? And I mean, how important is that, you know? So yeah, and so there's like, you know, they people, a lot of people just say, believe on the Lord and you shall be saved. Okay, which is true. You shall be saved. That's a future thing, right? It's a future tense. And so, you know, there's like, but the thing is, there's more than one verse in the Bible. You know? You don't just pick the parts you like. It's not a cafeteria. So anyway, but yeah, justification is a very key issue in the amount of divisions between different denominations because of this idea of what does justification, or what does it mean to be saved, is a very key issue. But here it says, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved. So you have to endure and continue in the faith. So anyway, but when they persecute you in this city, flee ye into another. For verily I say unto you, ye shall not have gone over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man be come. And again, here we have that title, Son of Man again. It's key because as I said last week, the Son of Man existed in, you know, in the Old Testament, because Daniel saw him standing, you know, God the Father and God the Son, and the God the Son was referred to the Son of Man. So it's, this is a key title of Jesus Christ. Yeah, the people who are saying justification is not progressive, you need to prove that by Scripture, or, we're only going by what the Bible says, okay? So, anyway, we go on, verse 24 of chapter 10. The disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his master, and the servant as his Lord. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his household? So again, he's saying, hey, and he says this in other ways, if they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. So anyway, so fear them not, therefore, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known. What I tell you in darkness, that speak ye in light, and what ye hear in the care, that preach ye upon that preach ye upon the, and what ye hear in the ear, that preach ye upon the housetops. So he's telling them, privately, and he's saying, you're going to tell this to the whole world. But initially, of course, as I mentioned previously, at that point, they're only going to, what you hear in the ear, that preach ye on the housetops. That's kind of a flat earth reference, because you can reach the whole world from the housetops, I guess. But not a real definite one. Yeah, Romans 10:9, you need to read on. There's more to it. There's more than one verse in the Bible. Okay, so anyway, I know justification is a sensitive issue, but we're just going to read what's in the Bible. So, and fear not that which can kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. So this one is interesting because it talks about destroy both soul and body in hell. So I'm going to have to pull out my giant Bible, see if there's any note on that amplifies that verse anymore. That would be Matthew 10:28. Here, Monster Bible. Oh, this thing is so heavy. Okay. So Matthew. Solo Cat, we are using the King James 1611 version. That's the original version of the King James. Let's see. Okay, Matthew 10:28. This big giant Bible has a lot of interesting footnotes that can sometimes expound on, something that, where, like it says, how can you cast both soul and body into hell? I mean, I thought only your soul went to hell. So, like I say, the way I study the Bible is I ask as many dumb questions as possible and look for the answer. Let's see if there is one here. Let's see. I don't know. Does anybody else have a thought on that? If you do, pipe up in chat. So let's see what it says here. It says, "Fear not those that men are afraid of prison, yet they are not afraid of hellfire. They fear temporal punishment, but dread not the torments of eternal fire." St. Augustine in Baradius said, "He who continually fears hell will never fall into it." That's interesting. "But he is negligent will undoubtedly fall." So, I guess they're talking about when the second resurrection, when, you know, when everybody's resurrected and some are cast into eternal damnation. So maybe that's what he's talking about there. That's the only thing I can think of. If I find out anything more, I'll mention it next week. So yeah, this is the 1611 version, and underneath the YouTube screen, there's some links, and if you, there's an online 1611 version, online regular King James, and anyway, no, actually, Ricketson, boy, he's really poking things. Augustine was not a Gnostic. In his young days, he was a Manichaean, of the Manichaean heresy, and he later repented of it. In fact, in his and he talked about that in his writings known as the Confessions. So, and then he became a great scholar in the church. So let's see. Okay, so anyway, that was see. Okay, now, so we're talking, that was what that verse 28 was trying to say, was don't worry about prison and things that happen in this earth. Worry about what could happen to you in the next life. So anyway, as we go on to Matthew chapter 10, verse 29, are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing, and one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father, but the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. I always loved this when I was a kid, because it reminded me that even though there were so many people in the world, you know, God loves each one of us as if we were the only thing in his creation. That's how much he loves us. And this kind of brings that home. And so I always like that gospel verse there. Fear ye not therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. Whosoever shall confess me before man, I will confess him before my Father which is in heaven. And this is and whosoever shall deny me before man, him I will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. This is very kind of prophetic, because, you know, if you recall, in the early Christian church, there were many, many martyrs under Nero, Diocletian, and, you know, and what was the other one? Julian the Apostate, and trying to get them to deny Jesus Christ, or like under Augustus and the other Caesars after that, Augustus, Caligula, well, I think Claudius backed off on it. He didn't require it, but under Augustus and Tiberius and Caligula, they were required to burn, you know, pinch the incense, burn incense to the genius of the Caesar, to recognize Caesar's God. You could you could recognize Jesus as God, but you still had to recognize Caesar as God. And so a lot of them refused to do this and were martyred in the Colosseum because they refused to burn incense. There's just a simple little, they said, you don't even have to believe it. You can cross your fingers behind your back. We won't look. But they said because they would be not confessing Jesus as God if they recognize Caesar as God. So many, many martyrs because of that. So this is something to remember, that if wherefore whosoever therefore shall confess me before man, him will I confess before my Father which is in heaven. So we must be very careful not to, you know, oh, Nathan, I don't think he gets bored. I don't think God gets bored with our prayers, even if it's repetitive. As it says, our prayers rise up before his throne as incense, as it says in the Psalms. Yes, they could even burn incense to the Caesar. They said, you can cross your fingers behind your back. We won't tell. Just burn the incense. We'll give you your certificate and you can go free. Or you can get in that other line and Brutus is going to cut your head off. So that's what the early Christians faced. So anyway, it says, but whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. Then it says, think not that I am come to send peace on the earth. I come not to send peace, but a sword. And this is interesting because he brings this up at the Last Supper, where he says, sell your coat and buy a sword. So Jesus is not just a pacifistic, hippie from the first century, okay? He has some hard things to say. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. I can really relate to this because I'm the only Catholic in my family. That's right. When they refused to burn incense, right, Nathan? They refused to burn incense to Caesar, and they were killed. Many, many, many were killed in horrible, nasty ways too. If you ever read the martyrologies, it's just incredible the courage that these people showed. Anyway, and a man's foes shall be they of his own household. I can relate to that. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Now, this is not to say that you should hate your family. You should, of course, love your father and mother and your brothers and sisters and all that. But he's saying more, in other words, if you put your family obligation above your faith, that's wrong. That reminds me, I should post that it's about this guy, he's a pastor in a Missouri Synod Lutheran church, and he does these little cartoons that teach the faith, and he has one where he's proving to Mormons that they're going to hell. And he says, but is one of the missionaries, but I'd have to be, I'd have to stop being a Mormon. What would I tell my family? And he goes, let me get this straight. You're more of afraid of your mother than going to hell? And he goes, pretty much. So, does that make me a bad person? He says, no, it just makes you Irish like us, because the two people are Irish. So anyway, he's saying nobody should be above your duty to God. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. And this is important to people to remember, that, as Christ took up the cross to be crucified, that we should not think of ourselves as any better. And he's saying here, take up your cross. In other places, he says, take up your cross daily. So all these things that we put up with over the day, all the hard little things, like my knees are sore right now, and my ankles are sore, and my head hurts. All of these things are ways that we carry the cross with Christ every day. So Calvin, he's talking about Calvin. Calvin burned his own friend, Michael Servetus, at the stake because he didn't believe like Calvin. So yeah, he lit the fuse to burn his friend Michael Servetus at the stake because he refused to accept Calvinistic teachings. That was in Geneva. So anyway, this is important, and especially, like with Holy Week and Good Friday coming up, all of us need to think about that, the things we put up with day in, day out. These are the ways that we take up the cross and follow Christ. So And then he says, he that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be an actual martyr, but in other words, you give your life to Christ. In other words, you're kind of losing it when you give your life to Christ. You're losing your life to yourself and giving it to Christ. And in this way, that's kind of the way he's saying that. He that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. He that receiveth you receiveth me, and he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. Now that's interesting. I wonder what the Giant Bible says about that one. He that receiveth you receiveth me, and he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. So that's like the one that sent Jesus is God the Father. So let's see. It's kind of I want to see if there's any amplification on this. Matthew chapter 10, verse 40. Monster Bible. This thing, this is like a notes, and they're like super tiny fine print too. That's the notes on here. Like this is the verse part, and then the notes are everything down below it. So this is a pretty useful book. Chapter 10, verse 40. Let's see if it has anything interesting to say about this. See. So he's talking about verse 39. He that findeth his life shall lose it. Behold the great losses that befall such as love souls. There are souls above measure. And on the contrary, the advantages that follow from hating them as they ought. That is, he that findeth in this life pleasures and comforts, and places his affections upon them, and all the glory thereof, as the flower of the field, the grass is withered and the flower is fallen. So man's glory seems to flourish and appears great, but falls away and dies before it has come to its full bloom. What duration is there in the flesh? What stability in the pleasures of the world? Today you may behold a young man, strong, beautiful, healthy, admired, and flourishing, and tomorrow you will find him quite changed, oppressed either with sin, labor, want, or sickness. So that was St. John Chrysostom. He was like a saint from the 250 AD. And St. Ambrose, who was about 380 AD. But if he continues moderately happy as to temporal concerns till death, and places his affection on him, he hath found life here, but shall lose it in the next world. But he that shall, for the sake of Christ, deprive him of the pleasures of this life, shall receive the reward of 100-fold in the next. So it's talking about how all of these things on the earth are just passing. They're mortal, they're fallen, but the things of the next world are eternal. So, it's a better deal, I guess. That's what they're saying. So, he that receiveth a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. He that receiveth a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. So basically he's saying when you receive, so anybody who receives the apostles is the same as receiving Jesus. And they will receive the same reward as if they had received Jesus. So that's what it's saying in verse 40 and 41. Whosoever shall give a drink unto one of these little ones, a cup of cold water only, in the name of a disciple, verily I say unto you, he shall in no wise lose his reward. So he's saying, if you do any good, as these apostles go forth and preach the gospel, if you do any good, because of what they preach to you, then you will be greatly rewarded simply for very small things like a small act of charity of giving a cup of cold water to somebody who's thirsty, or giving somebody some food who is hungry. all of these things you will receive because you have done it in the name of Christ, that you have received through the gospel from the apostles. So that's what he's saying, is the apostles are going forth and preaching the gospel. And anybody who accepts it and goes forth and does good things in this manner will receive a great reward. So anyway, that's the end of chapter 10. And it's just about a little over an hour. So I think we ended up just about right. I don't like to make these go over an hour. Does anybody have any more questions? You can be something, let me see in the chat if anybody has any questions. It can be, you know, it doesn't have to be related to this. Like Rich B.O.B., he asked about statues. If I don't have the right notes, I'll just have to say, I'll get back to you, but I'm totally willing to answer, you know, any questions you may have. Or I know that we raised a lot of issues about justification and what it means to be saved. But, you know, yeah, total depravity. Actually, there's a lot of verses that preach against total depravity. And Das Scarecrow, yes. Can you speak on the status of the Hebrew patriarchs prior to Christ's birth? The Hebrew patriarchs, okay, well, we did talk a little bit about Abraham last time, you know, Father Abraham, because he is the father in faith of the Gentiles, because all of the patriarchs point towards Christ. Everything in the Old Testament will point towards Christ. What is atonement theory? Oh, is that one of those Mormon things? But anyway, so Father Abraham is our father in faith because he actually wasn't under the Mosaic law, because Moses doesn't come around till a few centuries after Abraham. So, or I think it's like two centuries after Abraham. You know, Moses wasn't even there. So Abraham is specifically the father in faith for the Gentiles to be adopted in to the, you know, into the covenant. But it's under the new covenant, which, you know, yeah, that's a whole big thing. But there's a lot in the idea of the new covenant, because that's what New Testament means. It means new covenant. But the Christians are people under a covenant. And a covenant is not just, you know, a contract. It's a family relationship. Christians are part of the family of God. And this is emphasized many, many times throughout the epistles of the apostles. So anyway, I don't know if that's what you really wanted to, if that was your question about, but any other questions? No questions? There's a bit of a delay, so if you have a question, speak up now, because I'm about ready to sign off. So anyway, but thank you all for coming. And thank you for the great conversation and questions. You're pretty active in chat tonight. I didn't expect. The great you were talking about the patriarchs, the great divide after their death. I'm not sure what you mean by great divide. Yeah, the globe is a graven image. That is a graven image that was promoted by Freemasons. Why do you think that the Prime Meridian is now in London instead of where it used to be in Jerusalem? So yes, the globe is an idol, a graven image, a false god. So anyway, yeah, maybe if you can think of anything about the Great Divide, I've not heard of that theory. Yeah. Oh, Scarecrow, were you here when I was talking about statues at the beginning of the? I don't know if you were here when I was talking about statues at the beginning. You'll have to go back and review the recording. But yeah, I addressed the whole issue of statues are not the same as graven images. Graven image is a statue of a false god. That there can be many. I mean, you know, any Christian who walks into a art museum could be in trouble if, you know, statues were bad. But thank you all for coming. And, you know, like you say, if you came in a little late, it's all recorded, so you can go through there and catch up. So, and have a happy Easter, everyone, if you do that thing. Okay, bye now.